Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Redmen TV and your latest episode of Oppo Preview. My name is Dan Clubb. I'm delighted to be joined by Alfie House of the Daily Echo and the Total Saints podcast for this one. Alfie, how do you, mate? You okay?
Yeah, I'm all right. Personally, I'm all good. I had a nice time following England last week, but now the reality is setting in that we're back and, it's going to be a tough season ahead, I think.
Yeah, it couldn't really be more sort of polar opposite our two situations right now, could it? Liverpool fans were dreading the international break and desperate to get back to domestic and Premier League action. I imagine it roles reversed somewhat from your side. But yeah, let's talk about it. Let's dive straight into it. I always ask people the form, if you like, of their respective teams. I will use that word, but bottom, just the one win. I wanted to frame it in a slightly different way. Talk to us about how the season's gone, really, I guess. And was it what you expected? Has it been as difficult as you expected? But are you competitive in matches and can you see causes for optimism? What's the feeling?
Yeah, I think in terms of expectations first, Southampton came up through the playoffs, so you know that you're not one of the top two teams in the Championship, and that divide between the Premier League and the Championship is already massive. So you knew it was going to be tough. I think that nobody's surprised they're bottom right now. I think the lack of points is a problem because you just sort of alluded to it there. But I think Saints have been competitive in games. They have been tonked a couple of times, and the worst one was by Bournemouth, who it's not a rivalry, it's not a derby, but it's a local side, and Bournemouth are meant to be the little brother to Southampton in some ways, and they got absolutely smashed by them, to tell you the truth. But they've done well in games against Arsenal, Man City, and just sort of, they're ahead against Arsenal, but not got the points. And that one win you mentioned, it was a massive win, much needed, but it was a little bit fortunate as well. They went 1-0 up against Everton, and then about 90 seconds later, Everton equalised, and it was ruled out for offside. So finally, a bit of luck on their side. The last game we had, obviously, Wolves were bottom, and they've leapfrogged Southampton in the process, but they were robbed by VAR. They were robbed by VAR against Leicester. And they've blown leads against Leicester and Ipswich as well. So we've gone through a lot in the first sort of 11 games of the season. I think they're probably about where they should be, if I'm being honest. The data will say that they should have more goals, they should have more points, but they don't look miles off it. So I don't think all hope is lost.
No, and that's a good way of looking at it, I guess, really, as well. And you touched on the underlying numbers there, and that kind of ties into my next question in many senses, because it feels like the big question at the moment, and every time we talk about Southampton and the plight that's been the season so far, it's sort of immediately followed by the style of play and Russell Martin's sort of belligerent approach to the fact that he's going to stick to his guns. He's continuing to do so, come what may, if you like, in many senses. On this one, can you understand the criticism? Are you on board with it? Are most of the fans on board with it? What's the general consensus down there about the fact that Russell Martin obviously got you promoted playing this way and seemingly will continue to do so regardless?
Yeah, well, let's be clear about what happened. So last season they had more possession than Man City. They were the highest ball taking team in English football. I think they must have had 61, 62% of the ball on average, and they've took that into the Premier League. I think only Man City have had more of the ball. They take a lot of risks at the back, or it's perceived risk. Russell Martin calls it. I mean, it is risk. They're giving away goals, but I think the style of play is an interesting one because it is the most obvious thing to somebody who's outside. But when you follow the club week in, week out, I don't think the problem is the fact they're passing out the back. The problem for me is they're taking all the risk in the final, the back two thirds. When they get into the final third, they're not taking any risks. They're playing it backwards or sideways, or they're balls going into the box aimlessly. And I think Russell Martin just wants them to have that same bravery that defenders have in the final third when actually you can make something happen. I think at this point, Russell Martin's probably running out of road, I would say, with the fans. I think he's got decent support with the board and the owners and things like that, and there's a reason why he's still here, right? Despite being bottom after 11 games. But I think people are getting a little bit tired of it. I understand the criticism because I think people always make the Vincent Kompany comparison, and he's actually referenced that himself. He said that I'm Russell Martin, I play for Norwich. I'm not Vincent Kompany. I'm not going to get the Bayern Munich job. But there are people saying that is he only basically playing career mode now? Is he managing for his own career, taking some up and down, and knowing that he's probably going to get a bigger job at Brighton or Man United or something like that at the end of the season? So I understand that side of the criticism, but so many players have joined because they want to play this way, or they say that. I think that I like the fact he's principled, like the fact he sticks to it, but he just needs to free them up in that final third, and I think then it will look better than it does now.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Yeah, like you're saying, I was gonna sort of make that same sort of Vincent Company reference actually
Mm.
because it is an easy one to make, and it's now not a well trodden path, but it's a starting to be trodden path, if you like. And I think
Mm.
a lot of people have said, well, the blueprint is there for a young aspiring manager to just stick to your guns, play with your philosophy, and regardless of results, almost you never know what's at the end of it ultimately. But as you said, and as he's referenced as well, he hasn't quite got the star power that maybe Vincent Company has. Let's touch on some injuries then. I know you were at the press conference earlier
Mm.
today, and there was big news actually stemming from it really regarding the injury front. Two massive blows from a Southampton perspective.
Yeah, I mean, two of their best players, Russell Martin called it. So Aaron Ramsdale and Jan Bednarek. Obviously, Aaron Ramsdale, £25 million goalkeeper, signed this summer. He's going to be out until probably Christmas, and Jan Bednarek maybe 1 or 2 weeks earlier, which, yeah, poses a problem. You know, they have been consistent. Jan Bednarek is a leader at the back. Ramsdale's obviously Ramsdale, you know him well. They've got Alex McCarthy who's going to come in. I imagine that Jack Stevens will replace Jan Bednarek and they'll bring in a different fullback and move Jack into centre back. So the options are there, but it's just when you need a little bit of luck. And I made this point to Russell because I felt a bit sorry for him. He didn't want to feel too sorry for himself, but they're trying to get better themselves. They need a little bit of luck. The last thing you need is literally your two best players getting ruled out for 6 weeks or whatever it is. So, yeah, that's a blow for him, but he's just got to manage it. Taylor Howard-Bellis will take on a lot of that Jan Bednarek responsibility now at the back. Obviously, fresh off scoring for England. He's going to be on cloud nine. Yeah, big ask. And there's not really any returning players either. So Kamaldeen Sulemana and Ryan Fraser have been declared fit, but they're not the most popular players in the fan base at the moment. So it wasn't much of a trade-off.
No, absolutely not. As I say, when it rains, it pours. It feels like a little bit when it comes to your luck and your fortune, somewhat. Suleiman is an interesting one. We won't spend too long dwelling on him, but I remember being always quite excited by watching him. He felt electric and just sort of direct, run it and go at people. But oh yeah, clearly not maybe getting the end product or the end results that time
Well,
might
look,
want.
yeah, I can tell you why you think that because he scored 2 league goals for Southampton since joining for 20 million quid, and they're both against Liverpool
There
in
you
the final
go.
day of the season. And
Yeah.
that's the only time he scored for Saints. Apart from that, I mean, I can't remember him doing anything last season. I think he's had problems with injuries, and if you go back and look at his career, he's never played more than about 1,100 minutes in a season, and it doesn't look like he's going to do that anytime soon at Saints. And I think they've had a poor history of club record signings. I'm thinking back to maybe Guido Carrillo for about 22 million quid. You may have heard of him, you may not. Such was his career. It's not like the player, it wasn't like Van Dijk and Mane were club record signings. They actually turned them into the players obviously they became for Liverpool. So yeah, they've it's a shame with Kamaldeen, but he's not the answer.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. What you've got in Alex McCarthy, I guess, a vastly experienced understudy, if nothing else, really. So yeah, wait and see how he gets on. Our next question was, and you probably mentioned the answer to this, although two of them may well be missing, key players really for Southampton moving forward, not just for the weekend in this game, of course, but sort of between now and the end of the season. Is Harwood-Bellis, you're going to have to take on a lot of that responsibility, as you alluded to, but also it feels if Southampton are going to get out of it, they will need goals, but they will also need someone like Harwood-Bellis, who clearly has Premier League level football in him to step up.
Yeah, I mean, if I was to give 5 key players, the first two would be Ramsdale and Bednarek. We know that. You've mentioned Howard-Bellis. He would be the third one. Aerial threat, good at the back, takes the ball in brave areas, and he's got actually a killer diagonal pass as well, which you may or may not see on Sunday. But then the other two are Flynn Downs, who's a defensive midfielder. Before the Wolves game last weekend, he was training, warming up, ready to go, and then they had to pull him off last minute, and they conceded a goal where I'm certain he would have been there in the second minute of that game, which obviously changed the course of it. And then finally, you probably heard about Tyler Dibbling, who's 18 years old. Bit of a creative monster at the moment, to be fair. He's dropped out of the team for the last couple of games, I think based on fatigue and tactical responsibilities, but he's clearly someone who can make an impact off the bench. And then maybe finally, I'd actually give a shout out to Matty Fernandez as well, who, I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'd put money on him being at Man United this time next year because obviously working with Ruben Amorim at Sporting, they signed him for 15 million quid and he's been an absolute joke. Goes both ways with the ball, can tackle, can pass. He's centre midfield player. He's exceptional.